Well, thank you all for coming. We've had a great person to honor today. There are just a couple things I want to say, and then there are a couple other people who want to have something to say, and then I hope there'll be other people who thought of something during dinner or else in a while they might like to say. This is unstructured. But one thing I thought I'd refer to is we actually had, and we were ready to present the parody of America the Beautiful, which was actually written by Harry's friend. The words were written by Harry's friend Frank Westheimer, but Harry recorded it on the clarinet with his administrative assistant playing the piano, so he had a much more orchestrated version of it. And it went without the clarinet and the piano. A carbonyl is polarized. The carbon end is plus. Nucleophiles will thus attack the carbon nucleus. It's not too high. The carbon, let's see. A Grignard yields an alcohol. Of types there are but 3. It makes a bond to correspond from sea to shining sea. Okay, the other, we cut out John Parr this afternoon, so I'm going to put him in again. One of the things about Harry that was really special was how important he could make you feel. This is what my wife always remembers from occasions like this. If you went up to Harry, or he came up to you usually, and he made you feel that of all the 115 people, you were the one he really wanted to talk to. Right? So John Parr, who was Harry's collaborator for the last 10 years, while Harry's group was being cut down from whatever number, maybe a dozen to 10 to 8 to 6, to finally just John Parr. And John had a story about this skill of Harry's, that he was in Harry's office once, he and Harry, and the phone rang, and it was some acquaintance, a chemist, an acquaintance of Harry, and Harry started talking to him, and this was the guy of all the world that Harry really wanted to be talking to. And they talked, and finally Harry said, "Gee, I'd like to keep talking to you, but we're having a meeting here with my whole research group." So, those were a couple of the stories that got left out this afternoon. But I'd like to invite Elga to say a few words here, because she's with us this evening.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank those of you, and there were an enormous number, who sent lovely, lovely condolence notes to me. And I wouldn't be able to even come to New Haven if I tried to answer all of them. But I really appreciate it, and I want to thank you at this late opportunity. And I want to thank the chemistry department and my 3 children, Dan, Steve, and Diana, because between the chem department and them, they did the planning for this without having me involved. And although people think retirement leaves you with a lot of free time, it doesn't. And so having this all planned without my being involved has really been wonderful. I'm sorry I couldn't join you this afternoon, but I hear it was eminently successful, and I really am grateful that this was arranged, and happy to see so many people whom I knew through Harry. Harry and I enjoyed 66 years of happy married life. He survived 2 serious bouts of cancer and died peacefully in December at the age of 93. So I never expected that we would have such a long and happy marriage. And we're gathered here today primarily to celebrate Harry's life in science and in art and the wonderful human being who touched everybody who had a chance to meet him or work with him. So thanks to all of you. And Harry, I'm only sorry Harry isn't here to hear all the compliments. Thank you.
I don't know if you had a chance to look through the program. It was a little bit lengthy today, but the center of it is a poem that Diana wrote, and I think she's going to read it to us now.
I did not get the height in the family. Before reading, there are a couple of housekeeping things I'd like to mention. Before you leave, we have copies for all the people here, really not everybody here, but every family, to take home. And this is a catalog from a show that my dad did. It's got lots of the wonderful pictures you saw today. They're out on the table as you leave, so each household should feel free to take one, take it home, and enjoy it. I love the crab picture. That's one of my favorites, and wonderful pictures of places that our parents traveled. I too want to thank everybody. This was just a wonderful occasion, and an occasion for us to get together as a family, which was also a lot of fun. And people came from, I understand, as far away as Tokyo, and that really touches us so deeply. And so we'll be around for a while and would love to talk with some more of you. I think one thing that didn't really come through tonight is that Harry, we sometimes called him Harry, so I feel okay doing that, but my dad did not have Alzheimer's, but he died after a long period of dementia. And it was very hard, as it is for so many families who experience losing somebody emotionally before physically. And as my dad got worse, he moved into a nursing facility at the retirement community where he and my mom have lived for the past 8 years. Everybody there loved my dad. He, even after he lost speech, he had a smile and a twinkle in his eye for the staff, and they would joke with him, and he was clearly a favorite. My mother visited him at least once every single day, and he no longer recognized me, but when she came down, she would sit and they would watch the news or a Red Sox game or something. And when my mother got up to leave, she'd lean down and he would purse his lips and give her a beautiful kiss. So he was very special to people right up to the end. It was late at night, a few weeks after he died, that I was trying to process my thoughts, and this piece of poetry emerged. My father spent his last months in simplified life. The patterns on a television screen held mystery we could not fathom. His sleep held dreams we could not share. What sands he sifted in that sleep, from Revere or Africa or Wellfleet, we could only guess, as when he used to lose himself in the mellow notes of his B-flat clarinet without score or companion. My father told great stories. He drew wonderful sketches. He might capture the twists of a tree trunk for all to admire, or the chemistry between a little girl and her horse for her pleasure alone. My father was a tease. He taught his sons to see wicked truths. He taught his daughter to be strong and weak, and his grandchildren that games could be invented with just a soap bottle. He collected people. His friendships were vast. My father never forgot a face. His love for my mother was intense and complex and strong. My father knew how to teach. He taught the most challenging of subjects as if it was Shakespeare. When his students struggled, he took it personally. He taught the dog to count. He taught his children to pun. My father loved words. He loved colors and sounds and tastes. He loved to get up early in the morning when the air was crisp. He greeted the milkman and the paper boy and the fruit vendor who came to the door. When he swam in the pool, we would watch his kick and his arms and his head rotate in and out, in and out. Transported to the Caribbean, my father loved to snorkel, and he got the most reluctant of his companions to swim with him in the clear, warm sea. The fish and coral and rock offered a palette of motion and mosaic and grace. On the night he died, my father and I listened to jazz, or I listened to jazz, and he was jazz. My father lived 90 rich years. He dissolved over a quiet 3. Now he is the color, and the motion, and the sound, and the sand. He is the mystery, and ours are the dreams.
Thank you, Diana. That's worth the whole symposium. That's all we planned, but we really hoped But there'd be some other stories too that people thought of during the day that they didn't have an opportunity to tell. Wally Ewart has a good one, and maybe he could come up and tell it.
Difficult to follow the family, and I'm just going to tell you something really pretty short, but I think it fits into everything we've heard today. I was a first-year graduate student. I had been there, it was like June, and so, been there since September. And my true love, she had gone to France to study, and she sent me that famous Dear Wally letter. That, it was great while I was here, but I'm over there, I want to be free, and all that. And talk about being knocked down. I was knocked way down. I think I stopped eating for a week. But I immediately decided I needed to go to France, where she was studying. And so I thought, how do I get there? Well, I didn't have a lot of money, but I thought, maybe I can get a loan, or I can figure out a way, and I have to get permission to go. And I've only been there, since September. And so I thought, this is really a risky thing, but I've got to do it. So I went to Harry, and I said to Harry, this is the situation. My love is in France. She sent me a Dear Wally letter, and I need to go over there and talk to her. He says, you're right. He says, I had a similar incident in my life, and you need to go over to France. He says, so you go down to the bursar's office, you tell them that Professor Wasserman says you need a loan to go to Europe to make sure you pursue your education for a PhD. And I sort of looked at him and I said, really? And he said, yes, you go down there. So immediately that day, went to the bursar's office, walked in, and I said to them, I need a loan because I'm going to go to Europe. Professor Wasserman says I need it because that's the way I can pursue my PhD. And the lady started writing it down. And I said, but the real reason I'm going is my love is there, and she sent me this letter. And the lady didn't put a word down. It says, Professor Wasserman says. That's all. So I left there thinking, I'm not going to get this money. I went back, and about a week later I get this call, and the call is about this loan. And I thought, oh my God, about this loan. We don't think it's enough money. We think you need more money. And I immediately said, no, it's fine. I'll be down to pick up the check today. And so I went down, picked up the check. I got on a charter flight to ACS charter flight to Europe, and saw my love. We ended up, she was in France, but I couldn't speak French, so I had to go somewhere neutral. So we went to Scotland. We sat on a beach for 4 hours in the cold and talked it out. And she wanted to, have her freedom, and I said okay. And then she came back that following August, and we were engaged in December, married the following July, and we've been married 50 years and 4 months. So that's sort of the story, but there's one sequel to it which I thought I ought to add. And that was, I came back when Yale was having their problems with TAs organizing, and they put together a graduate center, which we never had when I was here. And when I did that, I came in and saw Harry, and I said, he'd just come back from Italy, I think, and he had some sketches. He shared one with me, which I have, and I have on my wall. And I said, one thing I want to tell you is you were wonderful because you saved my life, because I really love the woman I'm with, and I really owe it to you. But he says, great, I'm glad you told me that. I've got to go home and tell Olga, because she's always saying I didn't treat my students right.
Don Plaggett.
Yes. Well, unlike Wally, who had, good judgment and what have you, I went and got my degree with Professor Wasserman, but unlike many of you who have planned your careers and such, I blundered through, and I started at Yale blundering. The Klein addition and what have you was built Marty, what was it, 63? 64? Any case, they built it, we were here, and they had a great champagne party. And there were lots of empty champagne bottles with polyethylene corks. So one of Sononoglu's students, Al Flowery, and I decided, gee, why don't we make sparkling rice wine? So we found a carboy, we sprouted rice, whatever, stuffed it into the carboy, fermentation occurred, we had a little bit of sugar and what have you, we got it up to about 11%, filtered it off, and then poured it into the bottles. Now, we were organic chemists, but we did remember PV equals NRT. So we calculated the amount of dry ice we should put in to get a fizz. We put it in, pounded the corks in, wired them down, and at that time there was a men's room sort of between the old Sterling Laboratory and the new Klein Edition, which had large window spaces, so we stacked these bottles up. Within a week, the explosion started. And they continued, and of course the maintenance staff was not willing to go into the John and whatever, so I felt I better own up, figuring that's going to get dismissed and whatever. I went to Harry, and I told him, he said, okay, clean it up. So Alf and I went in and we cleaned it up, and nothing else. I don't know whether any of the other faculty, Professor Heiberg or Professor Saunders, ever heard about this. Alf and I were extremely grateful for Harry's understanding. By the way, it tasted pretty good.
Well, Professor Wasserman was never one to be nonplussed. He always seemed to be in control. He was suave, he was sophisticated. I was in the lab one Saturday, and which is a good thing, because he called. And he says, Don, I'm at the house, I need some acetone. And I said, so you want reagent grade? Technical? Spectroscopic grade? What are we looking for? Don, just give me some acetone. So I got a quart container of acetone and raced down to Bishop Street. And the first time I ever saw Harry with a kind of a sheepish look, he opened the door, and he had just superglued his fingers together. And he had a clarinet concert that night. And it was going to be I think he was going to be looking for the repertoire for a clarinet for the left hand. Well, anyway, so he took the acetone and got his fingers apart. I think the concert went pretty well.
I'm Jim Wu from Cleveland, Ohio. And what I was thinking about today was thinking about my wife and daughter. And I remember that when our daughter was born, we learned how much it cost to take care of another human being. And I remember that my wife and I were both in training at the time, and her entire salary, because she had to be at work and I had to be at work, and her entire salary went to paying off the care of our kid. And then I looked at the brochure today, and I saw that Harry had trained 165 of us for 4 years. And we didn't have to pay tuition. We got a carte blanche when it came to what we spent. I once asked Dr. Wasserman, I said, what do you want of us, and how did you choose us? He said, I choose the best and I set you free, because you will come up with the creative ideas that will push whatever we're working on in different directions, and we'll all be a success. And so, in that sense, it's like my wife and I were, parents to our daughter. He was a parent. He was our father. He took care of all of us that trained with him for all of our lives here at Yale. And for that, it's a debt we can never repay, and we are eternally grateful for him taking care of us. Thank you.
There's always the one about Dick Wolfgang. You know this one about when Vlado Prelog was, who Harry really liked, was visiting as a Treat Me Johnson lecturer. There was a dinner at Elvis laughing. There was a dinner at the Wassermans. This is before I got here, but Harry told me that. He loved his stories. They changed a little bit from telling to tale, but they were always very good. But I think I've got the essence of it. So there was a dinner at the Wassermans for Vlado Prelog and a number of faculty there, including Dick Wolfgang, who was a chemical physicist, and was he was been about 34 years old, but he looked like he was about 22. And Prelog engaged him in conversation, and he continually called Dick Wolfgang Wolfram, and Dick would say, "It's Wolfgang," and they'd go along and he'd refer to him as Wolfram. It's Wolfgang. And finally, Prelog, who wasn't that old, I mean, by my standards now, he was like in his late 50s or something like that, but he thought of himself as really ancient. And he said, "How old are you?" And Wolfgang said, I'm 34. 34? I'm glad I called you Wolfram. One could go on a long time with stories, but I understand that people need other things to do, and you're confident at your tables and so on. So if there's another one, I'm glad to hear it. Any others? Okay, now it'll occur to you, this staircase wit thing. Why didn't I say X? Right, that wonderful story about Harry, or the word he really liked, like Scotia, he really liked. Right, he liked foreign languages and sayings in foreign languages. Like from Elga's father, he learned "Paints vessel kucha ugat" in Hungarian. Do you know what that means? Money talks, dog barks. When he went to some foreign country, he'd learn a polite phrase there, and then he'd use it. Like if you ask someone if they want a little more to drink, want some more to drink or something to eat, the word was skoshi, which is Japanese, which means a little bit. So he would always say skoshi. So these are going to occur. Pardon.
No, do you remember the story about the lecturer, some highly paid lecturer that somebody came from California?
The chauffeur? The chauffeur?
No, this was a very distinguished, highly paid lectureship at Yale. And I fortunately forget the name of the man who gave the lectures, but everybody was very disappointed because he was just dragging on, nothing new, and it was very disappointing. So Harry and I don't know who else talked to the janitors and arranged for the janitors to slow the clock in the room. Any of you remember that?
Calvin.
He began to sweat and look at the clock. And to me, it was one of the highlights.
Marty, of course, knows the story. But at the end, when he finally, Melvin Calvin, yeah, and because he had given a series of talks, and he would get about 10 minutes from the end of his time, and he would say, "I have a lot more to say, but there's not enough time to put it in," so he cut it short. So at the end, they slowed the clock down. And finally, he kept thinking, and then he said, "Somebody did that." Am I right, Marty?
He looked at his watch.
Oh, he looked at
Then looked at the clock.
And all all it cost was a bottle of liquor for the electrician.
Jim English was the one who got the electrician to do that.
Great memory.
Professor who was going on a lecture tour, but who had a great fear of flying. So he went on his lecture tour by having a chauffeur drive him from university to university. So the chauffeur would sit in the back of the room while the professor gave the lecture. And this went on and on and on, all during spring break. He must have been to about 12 different universities. And finally the professor said to the chauffeur, look, I'm so tired of giving this talk. You give the talk. So the professor, and so the chauffeur gives the lecture, and the professor sits in the back of the room. So he gives the talk, the chauffeur does, and then Q&A time starts. Right? And someone stands up and asks him, well, is that possible considering such and such and such? And the chauffeur pauses for a moment and says, that question is so trivial that even my chauffeur can answer it.
So, thanks everybody. Thanks for coming, and thanks again to the family for sharing Harry with us. It really made the department and made all our lives a pleasure. Thanks.